begging your enemies to save your species, the bizarre final gasp of a once mighty alien civilization. The Wadi, proud former adversaries of humanity, found themselves facing extinction. A genetic defect had left their warrior caste, the Kala, sterile and unable to produce the next generation of fighters. In a shocking turn, the Wadi ambassador revealed their desperate plan to Captain Vincent Phillips and Earth's top military brass. They needed human soldiers to mate with their females and father a new breed of Kala before their empire crumbled. For Vincent, a hardened veteran, this was an unthinkable request, whoring out his men to aliens. But Admiral Carlson made the dire stakes clear. The Wadi served as a buffer between human space and the hostile Zorlak. If the Wadi fell, the Zorlak would steamroll through, leading to a catastrophic war that could claim billions of human lives. Like it or not, humanity needed the Wadi to survive. Backed into a corner, Vincent assembled an elite team for the awkwardly named Operation Stud, a hot-headed pilot, a grizzled sergeant, and a brilliant xenobiologist, each handpicked for their unorthodox skills. But as they prepped for departure, the true scope of the mission became clear. The proud Wadi culture revolved around the Kala and their ancient traditions. For Vincent's men to be accepted as worthy mates, they'd have to navigate a gauntlet of bizarre and dangerous alien rituals. Ritual combat, public mating displays, mind-altering drugs, all to prove their mettle as breeders and fathers. The day the team shipped out, Vincent couldn't shake the sense that this mission would alter not just the fate of the Wadi, but the course of human history itself. On the Wadi homeworld, their human DNA and values would clash with alien biology and beliefs, testing their very notion of what it meant to be human. As the human team's shuttle touched down on the scorched landing pad of the Wadi capital, Vincent felt a mix of trepidation and purpose settle in his gut. The alien city stretched before them, a jumble of towering spires and organic curves that seemed to defy gravity. Swarms of small, dart-like vehicles buzzed between the buildings, while columns of smoke rose from distant factories. The air tasted acrid and metallic on Vincent's tongue. A delegation of Wadi officials awaited them at the base of the ramp, led by a tall, regal-looking female draped in shimmering robes. Her name was Zara, Vincent recalled from the mission briefing, the matriarch of the High Council and the mastermind behind this unorthodox plan. As Vincent and his men descended the ramp, the assembled Wadi sank to one knee in unison, pressing their fists to their chests in a gesture of respect. Zara stepped forward and extended a long-fingered hand in greeting. Up close, Vincent could see the fine scales that covered her blue-tinged skin and the sharp intelligence that glinted in her silver eyes. "Welcome to Kalahar, Captain Vincent," Zara said, her voice a melodic hiss. "We are honored by your presence and humbled by your sacrifice." Vincent clasped her hand, feeling the cool roughness of her skin against his palm. "The honor is ours, matriarch. We're here to do whatever it takes to ensure the survival of both our peoples." As the humans fell into step behind Zara and her entourage, Vincent couldn't help but notice the mixed expressions on the faces of the Wadi onlookers. Some gazed at them with undisguised hope and gratitude, while others glared with suspicion and barely concealed hostility. A few even spat on the ground as they passed, hissing words that Vincent's translator implant struggled to decipher. "Not everyone is thrilled about our little arrangement," Zara said, noticing Vincent's gaze. "There are those who see your presence here as a betrayal of our most sacred traditions." Vincent nodded grimly. "We were briefed on the opposition, this Talon guy and his followers. Are they going to be a problem?" Zara's lips tightened. "Talon is a fanatic and a fool, but he commands great respect among the more traditional elements of our society. He has vowed to do everything in his power to stop the breeding program." Vincent's hand drifted instinctively to the sidearm at his hip. "We won't let that happen, matriarch. My men and I are prepared to deal with any threat to the mission." As they emerged into a vast open-air plaza dominated by a towering statue of a Wadi warrior, Vincent caught sight of a group of protesters gathered at the base of the monument. They wore the same drab, hooded robes and carried signs scrawled with angry slogans in the jagged Wadi script. At their head stood a wiry, wild-eyed male who could only be Talon himself. The warrior priest gaze locked with Vincent's, and for a moment, the captain felt a chill run down his spine. There was something feral and unhinged in those eyes, a fanatic gleam that spoke of a willingness to do anything in the name of his cause. As the humans passed, Talon raised a clenched fist and shouted something in the Wadi tongue that needed no translation. The crowd erupted in jeers and chants, surging toward the procession with murder in their eyes. Vincent and his men tensed, hands dropping to their weapons. Then Zara stepped forward and held up a hand, her voice ringing out like a whip crack. The crowd froze as if turned to stone, then slowly began to disperse, muttering and casting baleful glances over their shoulders. Talon may have his supporters, Zara said calmly as they resumed walking, but the will of the High Council is law. He will not dare defy us openly. Vincent hoped she was right, because if Talon and his fanatics decided to make good on their threats, this mission would become a whole lot more complicated and dangerous. Corporal Alex Novak stared in fascination at the holographic display floating above the lab table, a shimmering tangle of alien anatomical diagrams and biochemical formulas. Beside him, Zara manipulated the interface with deft flicks of her long fingers, highlights the key points as she spoke. The Wadi reproductive cycle is triggered by a complex interplay of hormonal signals and environmental cues, she explained, zooming in on a pulsing network of glands and organs. In order to maximize the chances of successful hybridization, we will need to carefully monitor and adjust the timing of the mating rituals. Alex nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. He'd spent years studying the intricacies of alien biology, but the Wadi presented a whole new level of complexity and challenge. The prospect of unraveling those secrets and using them to create a new form of life both thrilled and humbled him. I've drawn up some initial hypotheses based on the data you provided, he said, calling up his own set of models and simulations. If we can find a way to synchronize the human and Wadi fertility cycles, I believe we can boost the conception rate by a significant margin. Zara leaned in closer, studying his projections with a critical eye. Alex caught a whiff of her strange, spicy scent and felt a sudden flush of heat rising in his cheeks. "Impressive work, Corporal," she murmured, flashing him a smile that sent a jolt straight to his groin. "Your expertise in xenobiology is even greater than I had hoped." Alex swallowed hard, trying to ignore the sudden tightness in his pants. "I'm just honored to be part of this mission, Matriarch. The chance to work with someone of your brilliance and dedication is a dream come true." Zara cocked her head, her silver eyes searching his face. "Is that all it is, Alex? A professional dream?" Before he could respond, she leaned in and brushed her lips against his cheek, a fleeting touch that sent shivers racing down his spine. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion over dinner," she whispered, her breath hot against his ear. "There is still so much for us to explore." In the training yard behind the palace, Vincent and Sergeant Riker circled each other warily, sweat gleaming on their bare chests and arms. A crowd of Wadi onlookers had gathered to watch the spectacle, their eyes glinting with a mix of anticipation and bloodlust. "Remember, Captain," Riker growled, his fists clenched at his sides, "this isn't just a sparring match. It's a goddamn mating display. We've got to show these bastards that we're the biggest, baddest studs on the block." Vincent nodded grimly, his gaze never leaving Riker's eyes. "So let's give them a show they won't soon forget." With a roar, Riker charged forward, his massive fist aimed squarely at Vincent's jaw. The captain ducked and spun, driving his elbow into Riker's gut and following up with a vicious uppercut that snapped the big man's head back. The crowd howled in approval as the two men traded blows, their bodies glistening with sweat and streaked with dirt and blood. They grappled and strained, muscles bunching and veins bulging as each sought to gain the upper hand. In the end, it was Vincent who emerged victorious, planting his foot on Riker's chest as the sergeant lay panting and beaten in the dust. The Wadi roared their approval, stamping their feet and beating their chests in a primal display of admiration. As Vincent helped Riker to his feet, he couldn't help but feel a surge of primal satisfaction at the adulation of the crowd. For a moment, he understood the allure of the Wadi way, the thrill of the fight, the glory of the conquest. But then he remembered the real reason they were here, not to prove their manhood, but to save a species from extinction. And that was a battle that would be won not with fists and fury, but with science and sacrifice. In the so-called breeding chambers, Vincent stood naked and nervous, trying not to fidget under the hungry gazes of the Wadi females, who circled him like wolves around a wounded deer. The air was thick with incense and strange, musky pheromones that made his head spin and his blood race. Before he could wrap his head around how quickly events were progressing, one of the females stepped forward, a tall, muscular beauty with piercing green eyes and a tangle of dark hair. She ran a clawed hand down his chest, tracing the lines of his muscles with a purr of approval. Vincent shuddered at her touch, feeling his body respond despite his reservations. He'd been briefed on the Wadi mating rituals, but nothing could have prepared him for the raw, primal intensity of the moment. As the female pushed him down onto the low cushioned dais in the center of the room, Vincent felt a moment of panic. This was really happening. He was about to mate with an alien creature, to father a child that would be half human, half Wadi. But then he felt the warmth of her body pressing against his, the urgency of her need that matched his own, and all thought fled before a tide of pure, primal arousal. Talon stood before the seething crowd of traditionalists, his eyes blazing with righteous fury. "The humans defile our sacred traditions," he roared, thrusting a clenched fist into the air. "They pervert the very fabric of our society. We cannot allow this abomination to continue." The crowd roared in agreement, a sea of angry faces and bared teeth. "The High Council has lost its way," Talon continued, pacing back and forth like a caged beast. "They have forgotten the teachings of our ancestors, the purity of our bloodline. It falls to us, the true guardians of Wadi culture, to set things right." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I say it is time for action, not words. Time to show these human invaders that they have no place on our world. Time to take back what is ours." As the crowd chanted his name and the name of their cause, Talon allowed himself a small, vicious smile. Soon, he would make the humans suffer for their arrogance, starting with that pompous Captain Vincent and his band of so-called studs. This whole sordid business with the humans would come to a violent end, one way or another. He would make sure of that. In Zara's private chambers, Alex lay tangled in silken sheets, his body still tingling with the aftershocks of pleasure. Beside him, Zara stretched like a sated cat, the light from the twin moons outside the window playing over her naked blue skin. "That was incredible," Alex breathed, shaking his head in wonder. "I never imagined that mating with an alien could be so pleasurable." Zara purred, tracing a lazy finger down his chest. "We Wadi females are known for our appetites." Alex laughed softly. "I'm beginning to understand why your males are so protective of you." A shadow passed over Zara's face. "Not all of them. Talon and his ilk see females as little more than breeding stock. They believe our only value lies in the sons we bear." She propped herself up on one elbow, her silver eyes boring into his. "That's why this mission is so important, Alex. Not just for the survival of my people, but for the rights and dignity of Wadi females everywhere. If we can prove that we are more than just vessels for male seed, that we have the right to choose our own mates and chart our own destinies." Alex silenced her with a kiss, feeling a sudden swell of admiration and protectiveness. Zara was more than just a brilliant scientist and an amazing lover. She was a visionary, a warrior in her own right. "We're going to make this work," he vowed as he pulled back, his voice rough with emotion. "No matter what Talon or anyone else tries to do, we're going to create a new future for the Wadi, together." In the early hours of the morning, an explosion ripped through the palace compound, jolting Vincent from a restless sleep. He bolted upright, reaching instinctively for his weapon. Alarms blared and lights flashed as he raced through the corridors, his heart pounding in his chest. He found Riker and Lieutenant Torres crouched behind a barricade of overturned furniture, weapons at the ready. "What's happening?" Vincent demanded, scanning the smoke-filled hallway for signs of movement. "It's Talon," Riker spat, his face a mask of anger. The bastard launched a full-scale assault on the breeding facility. He's got a goddamn army out there. Vincent cursed under his breath. He'd known Talon was a threat, but he hadn't expected him to make such a bold move so soon. Torres, get on the comms and give me a sit rep, he ordered, checking the charge on his sidearm. Riker, you're with me. We need to secure the facility and evacuate the civilians. As they moved out, picking their way through the rubble and carnage, Vincent's mind raced. If Talon got his hands on the hybrid offspring, all their efforts would have been for nothing. The future of the Wadi and the fate of both their species hung in the balance. Suddenly, a burst of plasma fire sizzled past Vincent's ear, scorching the wall behind him. He dove for cover, returning fire blindly into the smoke. Contact front, Riker yelled, squeezing off a burst from his rifle. Talon's goons, dead ahead. Vincent gritted his teeth and charged forward, all thought of caution forgotten. Talon may have brought the fight to them, but Vincent was damn sure going to be the one to finish it, despite the toll. As more plasma bolts streaked through the air and the sound of battle filled the hallways, Vincent couldn't suppress a savage grin. After all, this was what he'd been trained for, the rattle of gunfire and the acrid smell of combat. He just hoped it would be enough to carry the day and secure a future for two worlds. Vincent crouched behind a fallen pillar, pulse rifle clutched tightly to his chest. Plasma bolts sizzled overhead as Talon's forces pushed deeper into the palace. Through the smoke and chaos, he caught glimpses of Riker and Torres laying down suppressing fire. We need to fall back, Riker shouted over the din. Regroup at the breeding chambers. Vincent nodded grimly, signaling the retreat. As they fought their way through the corridors, his mind raced. The hybrids, his children, were vulnerable. If Talon got his hands on them, they burst into the dimly lit chamber, sealing the reinforced doors behind them. Zara was there, along with a group of terrified Wadi scientists, and in the center of the room, protected by a shimmering force field, were the hybrids. Vincent's breath caught in his throat. It had been weeks since he'd last seen them, and their growth was astonishing. What should have been infants now appeared as young children, their skin a mottled blend of human and Wadi tones, their eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intelligence. One of them, a girl with his dark hair and Wadi silver eyes, locked gazes with him. In that moment, he felt a presence brush against his mind, alien yet achingly familiar. They're telepathic, he breathed. Zara nodded, her face a mix of pride and concern. And telekinetic. Their development has exceeded our wildest expectations. A thunderous explosion rocked the chamber. Talon's forces were attempting to breach the door. We need to get them out of here, Vincent said, his protective instincts surging. Is there another way? Before Zara could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Lieutenant Torres, monitoring communications, cursed loudly. Captain, we've got bigger problems. Long-range sensors are picking up a massive fleet entering the system. It's not Talon's people. It's the Zorlak Empire. Vincent's blood ran cold. The Zorlak were ruthless expansionists, always looking for vulnerable worlds to conquer. With Kalahar already in chaos, they were ripe for invasion. As if in response to his thoughts, the young hybrid girl raised her hand. The air shimmered, and suddenly a holographic display materialized, showing the approaching Zorlak armada. By the gods, Zara whispered, they're tapping into our sensor networks. Vincent stared at his daughter in awe and trepidation. These children, born of desperation and alien ritual, were more powerful than he could have imagined, and now they were about to be thrust into the crucible of war. The chamber shuddered as Talon's forces renewed their assault on the door. Outside, the first Zorlak ships entered Kalahar's atmosphere. Caught between two enemies, Vincent made his decision. Zara, can you get the children to safety? She nodded, her eyes hard with willpower. There's a series of underground tunnels. We can reach the planetary defense grid from there. Vincent turned to his team. Riker, Torres, you're with me. We'll hold off Talon's people. Buy them time to escape. He looked at the hybrids, his chest tight with a mixture of pride and fear. And then we'll show the Zorlak why they should have stayed the hell away from our planet. As Zara ushered the children toward a concealed passage, Vincent's daughter paused. She reached out, touching his hand. In that brief contact, he felt a surge of emotions, love, fear, and a fierce grit that mirrored his own. Then she was gone, disappearing into the shadows with her siblings and Zara. Vincent turned back to the door where Talon's forces were moments away from breaking through. He raised his rifle, Riker and Torres flanking him. The battle for Kalahar and the future of two species was about to begin. Begin. The sound of battle echoed through the corridors as Vincent and his team held their ground against Talon's forces. Plasma bolts sizzled past, scorching the walls and filling the air with acrid smoke. Suddenly, the comms crackled to life. "Captain!" It was Zara, her voice tight with urgency. "We've made it to the underground command center, but we've uncovered something dire. You need to get down here immediately." Vincent exchanged a quick glance with Riker. "Go." His second-in-command nodded. "We'll hold them off." Ducking and weaving through the chaos, Vincent made his way to a concealed lift. As he descended into the bowels of the facility, his mind raced. What could be worse than their current predicament? The lift doors opened, revealing a cavernous room filled with holographic displays and blinking consoles. Zara stood at the center, flanked by the hybrid children. His daughter, the one who had touched his mind earlier, stepped forward. "Father," she said, her voice eerily mature for her apparent age. "I'm Jake. This is my sister, Alara." She gestured to another hybrid with striking blue skin and Vincent's eyes. "We've discovered a traitor in our midst." Before Vincent could process this, Zara pulled up a holographic display. "It's General Korthax," she said, her voice hard. "He's been working with the Zorlak Empire all along. His plan is to overthrow the High Council and use our hybrid children as weapons to conquer neighboring systems." Vincent's blood ran cold. "How do you know this?" Jake's silver eyes gleamed. "We can see it, in the data streams, in the encrypted transmissions. Our minds can process information in ways you can't imagine." A proximity alarm blared. On the main view screen, Vincent watched as a platoon of Tsenkethi soldiers, led by General Korthax himself, marched toward their position. "He's coming to take control of the hybrids," Zara said, her face pale. "If he succeeds—" "He won't," Vincent growled. He turned to Jake and Alara. "Can you two fight?" The hybrid children exchanged a look, then nodded in unison. "We can do more than fight," Alara said, a fierce grin spreading across her blue face. As Korthax's forces breached the outer defenses, Vincent felt a surge of pride and fear. His children, these impossible, miraculous beings, were about to face their first true test, and the fate of two worlds hung in the balance. The blast doors buckled under sustained plasma fire. Vincent raised his rifle, Jake and Alara flanking him, their eyes glowing with otherworldly power. As Korthax's soldiers poured into the room, the air crackled with psychic energy. The battle for control of the hybrids and the future of the galaxy had begun. The air crackled with psychic energy as Jake and Alara unleashed their powers. Korthax's soldiers stumbled, weapons clattering to the ground as invisible forces battered them. Vincent moved with practiced efficiency, his rifle spitting plasma bolts into the stunned enemies. But their victory was short-lived. The facility shuddered, dust raining from the ceiling as explosions rocked the upper levels. Lieutenant Torres' voice crackled over the comm. "Captain, the Zorlak have breached our orbital defenses. They're launching dropships." Vincent's blood ran cold. He turned to Zara, her face mirroring his own stubborn persistence. "We need to evacuate, now." As they raced through underground tunnels, the sounds of battle grew louder. They emerged into chaos. Tsenkethi defenders trading fire with Zorlak shock troops, buildings ablaze against the night sky. "This way!" Zara shouted, leading them toward a hidden hangar. "We have ships that can break through the blockade!" They were halfway there when a Zorlak cruiser screamed overhead, disgorging a platoon of armored troops. Vincent raised his rifle, but Jake stepped forward, eyes glowing with otherworldly power. The lead Zorlak soldier clutched his head and collapsed, and for a moment, Vincent dared to hope. Then a pale mist descended from the cruiser, enveloping Jake. The boy's eyes widened in panic, his outstretched hand trembling. "Father," he gasped, I can't feel them anymore." Vincent watched in horror as Jake's powers flickered and died, the Zorlak bioweapon stripping away everything that made his son extraordinary. Alara screamed, a sound of pure anguish that tore at Vincent's heart. "Get them to the ship," he roared at Zara, laying down covering fire as she half-dragged, half-carried the disoriented Jake. They made it to the hangar, but Jake was fading fast. His silver eyes, once so full of alien intelligence, now clouded with pain and confusion. "Dad," he whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm just slowing you down." Vincent felt his throat constrict, tears stinging his eyes. "No, Jake, we're getting out of here together. All of us." But Jake shook his head, a sad smile on his face. "You know that's not true. Please, Dad, don't let me become a burden. Don't let them use me against you." Vincent's hand trembled as he raised his sidearm, every fiber of his being screaming in protest. Zara's anguished cry and Alara's sobs faded into the background as he looked into his son's eyes one last time. "I love you, Jake," he whispered. "I know, Dad. I love you too." Vincent squeezed the trigger, and a piece of his soul died with his son. The next hours passed in a blur of rage and grief. Vincent tore through Zorlak forces like a man possessed, heedless of the danger. Only Zara's desperate pleas and Alara's terrified face pulled him back from the brink of self-destruction. As they regrouped with the remaining hybrid children in a makeshift bunker, Zara approached Vincent, her face etched with lines of exhaustion and sorrow. "I've found a way to protect them," she said softly, "a gene therapy that will make them immune to the Zorlak virus. But it comes at a cost." Vincent listened as she explained, his heart heavy with the weight of impossible choices. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "We have to give them the choice." One by one, the hybrid children chose to sacrifice their godlike powers for survival. Vincent watched as Alara, tears streaming down her blue cheeks, stepped forward to receive the treatment. As the last traces of her psychic abilities faded, she looked up at him with eyes that were purely human. "What happens now, Dad?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. Vincent pulled her close, feeling the weight of all they had lost, and all they still had to fight for. "Now," he said, "we show the Zorlak that we don't need superpowers to be extraordinary."
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.